Fortifications. The American artillery bombarded the island for days, but failed to leave even a scratch on the Japanese defenses 7 stories underground. To clear this subterranean fortress where bullets were useless, the Marines had to invent one of the world's most brutal yet effective tactics: corkscrew and blowtorch. Get ready to witness the bloody epic written in those dark days by flamethrowers and the unshakable American will. February 19th, 1945. In the middle of the Pacific, an 8-square-mile piece of volcanic rock called Iwo Jima was about to turn into the deadliest island on Earth. Thousands of American Marines, packed inside landing craft, looked at this sulfur-smelling island, unaware of the horror that awaited them. The ramps dropped, and boots hit the volcanic black sand. As the Marines stepped ashore, something strange happened. Silence. There was no sound of gunfire, no sign of the enemy, only the shifting black ash beneath their feet and the towering Mount Suribachi in the distance. But this silence was not peace. It was the beginning of a deadly trap set by General Kuribayashi. Just as the Marines began to pile up on the shore, thousands of barrels from underground opened fire simultaneously. In seconds, Iwo Jima turned into a graveyard for the living. The bullets weren't coming from the sky, they were coming from inside the earth.
What distinguished Iwo Jima from all other Pacific islands was the sinister genius in the Japanese Army's defense strategy. General Kuribayashi knew that a coastal defense was suicide, so he turned the island into an underground fortress. When the Marines landed, they didn't see an army. They saw an empty landscape. That's because 21,000 Japanese soldiers were inside a massive tunnel network, totaling 11 miles in length. These tunnels weren't just for hiding troops. They housed hospitals, ammunition depots, and command centers. Despite the U.S. Navy bombarding the island for days, the Japanese defenses remained untouched beneath the surface. This was the most complex and deadly underground fortification history had ever seen.
The Marines felt the horror of fighting an invisible enemy for the first time that day. Every hero who fell on those sands was a part of the heavy price America paid for freedom, and this was only the beginning. The Japanese would emerge from the tunnels, fire, and then vanish back underground like ghosts. Every rock, every cave entrance on the island was a death trap. American soldiers had to pay in blood for every single meter they moved from the beach. But in the United States Marine Corps' dictionary, there was no such word as retreat. They had entered hell, and now they were determined to bring that hell down upon the Japanese. Even the first seconds of this relentless struggle show how unshakable the American spirit truly is. In your opinion, how does fighting an invisible enemy affect a soldier's psychology? What is the most striking fact you know about Iwo Jima? Share it with us in the comments so we can honor this massive struggle together. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to see the rest of the series and how this underground nightmare was cleared. Although the first shock on the beach had been weathered, the real war was just beginning. As the Marines pushed inland, they realized that Iwo Jima was not just an island, it was an anthill. They would clear a cave, only to have fire opened from that same spot minutes later. That's because the hole they cleared was just one exit of a labyrinth stretching for miles underground. The Japanese were using these tunnels to infiltrate behind American lines. At night, even the moonlight provided no sense of security among these pitch-black volcanic rocks. A shadow gliding through the brush, the tip of a bayonet emerging from a tunnel. The Marines weren't just fighting an enemy, they were fighting sleep deprivation and a ghost that could appear from anywhere at any moment.
At this stage, American military genius had to step in, because classical tactics simply didn't work in this subterranean world. Our Marines developed a method they called corkscrew and blowtorch to clear these tunnels. This method was a combination of explosives, the corkscrew, and flamethrowers, the blowtorch. As the Japanese refused to come out of the tunnels, Marines would use magnetic charges to collapse entrances or blast flames inside that emitted thousands of degrees of heat. Technically, this was one of the most brutal yet effective close-quarters combat methods in human history. For a Marine, every cave entrance was a dark gamble with no end in sight.
Tanks equipped with flamethrowers and brave soldiers rushing toward tunnel mouths with explosives in hand once again proved America's technological and physical superiority. Yet the Japanese inside the tunnels would not surrender despite hunger and thirst, waiting until their final breath. The sulfur gas and extreme heat inside had turned the tunnels into an oven. Every American soldier moved forward thinking, either this will be my grave or I will tear these monsters out of here. For the Japanese commanders looking down from the top of Mount Suribachi, victory was impossible, but they aimed to inflict as much damage as they could on the American infantry. What they didn't know was that American resolve was stronger than any tunnel or wall. As the days passed on Iwo Jima, the American command realized a bitter truth. Traditional artillery fire and aerial bombardment simply weren't working on this island. Every square inch was filled with thousands of pillboxes, machine gun nests reinforced with concrete and interconnected by tunnels. When a Marine cleared one nest, the enemy would simply move to another one 100 yards away through a tunnel. This led to the birth of America's most legendary close-quarters combat tactic, Corkscrew and Blowtorch. This wasn't just a tactic. It was an art of life and death. At the front, flamethrower operators carrying 70 pounds of flammable fuel on their backs. Right behind them, combat engineers holding C4 explosives to seal the entrance. Every cave mouth was like a gateway to hell, and closing that gate required nerves of steel.
So how exactly did this corkscrew and blowtorch tactic work? The Marines would first suppress the enemy inside by opening heavy fire on the cave entrance. Then, the flamethrower operator, the blowtorch, would approach the entrance and blast gelled fuel at thousands of degrees inside. This didn't just burn the enemy, it consumed all the oxygen in the tunnel. Immediately after, the second soldier, the corkscrew, would place explosives in the ventilation shafts or entrances to completely collapse the tunnel. This method was incredibly dangerous because flamethrower operators were the #1 target for enemy snipers. One hit meant the soldier would instantly turn into a fireball. American military genius invented this brutal but necessary method to adapt to the impossible conditions of Iwo Jima.
While the Marines attacked these death nests with explosives on their backs, buried up to their knees in volcanic ash, they were writing one of the greatest heroic epics in world military history. Every cleared tunnel was a step taken on the road to freedom. However, the resistance grew even fiercer as the Japanese defense retreated to the area in the heart of the island, known as the meat grinder. For the American soldiers, a war of will had begun, not just against the enemy, but against nature itself and the never-ending threat coming from beneath the ground. America's sons were writing history in the shadow of Suribachi. As they pushed toward the north of the island, the landscape turned even more horrific. The Marines gave this place a name, the meat grinder. This was a rugged terrain where the Japanese tunnel network was at its densest, with an artillery battery hidden under every single rock. Here, distance was no longer measured in miles, but in centimeters. Moving just 10 meters in a day could mean suffering hundreds of casualties. From inside the tunnels, the Japanese opened fire not just with rifles, but with massive mortars that tore American tanks apart like paper. The moment an American soldier lifted his head, he faced a bullet coming from a hole in the ground. This was the most claustrophobic and unjust war history had ever seen, because the enemy was there, but never visible.
The tunnel system in northern Iwo Jima was General Kuribayashi's masterpiece. In this region, the tunnels weren't just for moving troops. They even had special cooling systems, so the ammunition wouldn't be affected by the heat. American intelligence only realized the true scale of the power the Japanese held underground once they entered this sector. For the Marines, the real challenge here was that a cleared area would be refilled with enemies within minutes thanks to the tunnels. The American command switched to a seal and bury strategy instead of search and destroy. They were no longer trying to flush the Japanese out. They were burying them alive inside the very underground tombs they had built. This is one of the darkest yet most telling pages of American resolve in military history.
The United States Marines did not take a single step back, even as their friends fell one by one beside them. Looking into those dark holes, they saw not only death, but the unshakable honor of America. Every soldier who entered the meat grinder emerged a hero, if they emerged at all. The suffocating smell of sulfur and the endless sound of machine guns from inside the tunnels echoed in the Marines' ears like a battle hymn. The price paid to wave that famous flag atop the summit was the bloodshed inside these dark tunnels. The heart of Iwo Jima was slowly melting under the fire of the American spirit. February 23, 1945. On the southern tip of Iwo Jima, there was movement at the summit of Mount Suribachi, overlooking the entire island. After days of suffocating tunnel warfare, bloody beaches, and sleepless nights, a group of Marines had managed to reach the peak. And in that moment, the most iconic image in American history occurred. 6 heroes raised the American flag at the highest point of the smoking volcanic hill. When the flag fluttered in the wind, thousands of soldiers on the beaches and ships below cheered simultaneously. This was not just a piece of fabric. It was a victory cry against the darkness of the tunnels. But while the flag flew high above, a deadly silence reigned below. Within the massive cave systems of Suribachi, the Japanese had not surrendered. They had only retreated deeper and further into the darkness.
Many people believe the Battle of Iwo Jima ended when the flag was raised. In reality, it was exactly the opposite. When the flag went up, only about 1/3 of the battle was complete, and 30 of the bloodiest days still lay ahead. Mount Suribachi itself was actually designed like a 7-story underground building. Inside the mountain was a massive concrete fortress housing thousands of soldiers, with kitchens, hospitals, and radio stations. While the Marines raised the flag above, thousands of Japanese troops were still on high alert right beneath their feet. The American military displayed immense tactical maturity here. After securing the summit, they began to locate and seal every single ventilation shaft and cave entrance one by one. This was turning a mountain into a prison. American logistical power began to defeat the enemy not just by fighting, but by making the island unlivable for them.
That flag waving on Suribachi was a beacon of hope for the Marines. But it was the beginning of the end for the enemy in the tunnels. The American soldiers now knew this island would be taken not just from above, but by digging it out from the roots. The Marines began leaving gifts in every hole at the foot of the hill. Hand grenades, sticks of dynamite, and those never-ending flames. One by one, the tunnels inside Suribachi fell silent before the steel will of America. But the famous Valley of Death in the north of the island still stood like a fortress woven with tunnels, waiting to be crossed. By mid-March, Iwo Jima no longer looked like an island. It looked like a giant mass grave. The tunnel networks in the north were now so complex that Marines sometimes faced sudden Japanese raids occurring meters behind their own lines. However, the United States Marine Corps is the most adaptable and unstoppable war machine in the world. Instead of entering the caves, a bulldozer was brought to the mouth of every entrance. As the Japanese opened fire from within, American engineers sealed the entrance with tons of earth and concrete.
What happened in the final days of the war was the most ruthless form of military genius. American troops began pumping water and gasoline into the tunnels, then setting them ablaze. This method ended all life within the tunnels in minutes. However, the true success of American military genius was not just clearing these tunnels, but recovering the intelligence within. The maps and documents pulled from the tunnels allowed us to understand how other Japanese islands in the Pacific were defended. Every time a Marine entered a cave, he didn't just win a victory, he gathered information that would save the lives of thousands of future American soldiers. By the end of March, only a few hundred of the 21,000 Japanese soldiers remained alive. The others had fallen into an eternal sleep in the dark and sulfurous heart of Iwo Jima.
This was the most terrifying stage of the war, burying the enemy underground. The screams from inside the tunnels merged with the sound of machine guns outside. General Kuribayashi's ghost army was suffocating inside the very tunnels they had perfectly constructed. On the night of March 26, 1945, the Japanese emerged from their tunnels one last time. This was not a defense, it was a suicide mission. They attacked American camps with cries of banzai, but they met the unshakable wall of American defense. When dawn broke, Iwo Jima was finally silent. The endless clicking from the tunnels had ceased, replaced by the heavy scent of victory. The U.S. Marines had sealed the victory they won on the surface by ending the nightmare underground. This victory was a result not only of the physical strength of the American military, but also of its immense intelligence and patience, which could overcome any obstacle. Iwo Jima was now free, but those tunnels would remain as monuments forever. When the gunfire finally fell silent on Iwo Jima, all that remained was the howling wind and a volcanic silence smelling of sulfur. The toll of those 36 days of hell was heavy, yet the victory won was a turning point in the history of the American military. Those deadly tunnels underground were no longer traps, but dark memories of a defeated enemy. As the Marines looked back while leaving the island, they left behind not just black sands, but a fortress cleared inch by inch with blood and sweat. The tunnels of Iwo Jima might have been a defensive masterpiece for the Japanese, but for the United States Marines, these tunnels were a test where they showed the entire world how the impossible is achieved. America had proven that it would not kneel underground, just as it would not kneel on the surface.
The military legacy of Iwo Jima goes beyond the tunnels. This island is the purest example of the American military genius's principle of adapt and destroy. Even after the war ended, there were Japanese soldiers still hiding in the depths of the tunnels, unaware that the war was over. The last Japanese soldier did not surrender until 1949. Today, although most of these tunnels are kept closed due to volcanic activity and safety reasons, they remain a laboratory for military historians. The underground clearing tactics developed on Iwo Jima are still part of the training doctrines of modern armies today. The American military illuminated that darkness in the heart of Suribachi, not only with flames but with strategic intelligence. This victory is a perfect fusion of logistical power and individual heroism.
Today, those who visit Iwo Jima still feel the presence of the tunnels beneath their feet as they walk on those black beaches. Those corridors are no longer battlefields, but silent witnesses standing in respect for the thousands of American sons who gave their lives for freedom. That flag waving on Mount Suribachi is a victory not only for the soldiers at the top, but for every single Marine who clashed with that nightmare 7 stories underground. In the tunnels of Iwo Jima, the American soldier buried not only the enemy, but fear itself. My friends, we have reached the end of our journey into the claustrophobic and heroic underground world of Iwo Jima. This video is a tribute to the American spirit that finds its way even in the dark. So, do you think the Iwo Jima tunnels were the toughest defensive line in history? Or do you know of a greater nightmare? Let's discuss this legendary struggle in the comments. As the War Room archives, we will continue to bring you the hardest battles in history. Don't forget to subscribe and like this epic of heroism. Stay in the light of freedom, and farewell.